We're going to be delving deeper and deeper and deeper into controversy. I'm just kidding. No, today we're going to be reacting to another Polish video or video pertaining Poland. As if you don't know, I hope to someday visit Poland and maybe find me a Polish wife. Who knows? Anything is possible these days. But we're going to be talking about why Poland is the safest country in Europe. That's a video title, if you don't know, which will be linked in the description below. All my videos that I react to, all the videos that I react to are always in the description, so always support the original creators. That being said, I'm assuming there's going to be some controversial topics as it's Poland's in the news for various different reasons. I don't want to talk about it right now. Kind of want to react to this video and then we comment and react together. That being said, this channel is always a conversation, meaning that if you comment your opinions down below, I will not hide them unless YouTube auto bans them. That's different. I don't control that. But I will never ever hide comments. I always encourage a conversation. I always want to hear what you have to say. And the way you stay up to date with that conversation of whatever video we're talking about is subscribing. So if you want to join the channel and join the conversation, consider subscribing. We're going to be watching this video. Let's get into it.
Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about a few controversial things, so buckle up. I wanted to share some of my unfiltered thoughts on why I believe Poland is so safe.
Because there's zero terrorist attacks in Poland. Because there is no illegal migration in Poland.
Juncker, the Commission President, says that you're racist. You sound proud of the fact that you haven't taken any refugees.
Of course, because this is what our people are expecting from our government. That is why Poland is so safe. I care about my family and about my country.
Now, nobody else wants to listen, but I love how Poland is proving it by action, and they're not afraid to not bend the knee and to step.
And you know what? I will say this. As an American who's seen American cities, even small towns get destroyed. Not like, oh, people are going around burning buildings. I mean, that happens too, right? With some of the riots that we have. But it's more of like seeing overcrowded like just cities become overcrowded, nonprofit resources and public resources being exhausted because people are taking advantage of it. And it's people who unfortunately come to the country illegally. As somebody who comes from a Mexican family, a Mexican heritage, whether you know it or not, the U.S. predominantly was Mexico. So there's a little bit of it's a different attachment to the land and a different. Also, Mexicans, if you don't know, were Native American. And to be honest, a lot of us are still majority Native American. If you were to do a blood test on me, I'm 48% Native American. So it just depends on how we identify ourselves. I live predominantly a Hispanic Mexican lifestyle, so I kind of attribute that more to myself. But that being said, one of the things that I found really interesting, and I want to get this in the beginning of the video because I think it's really important. There's a difference between Mexicans migrating to the country who didn't already live here or weren't already here, but one of the differences is like you see a lot of the Mexican population historically come here, want the American dream, buy into America, assimilate as best as they can, like contribute as best as they can, have pride in what it is and what the United States is, which you could say, well, it's only because it used to be Mexico. Fair. But at the same time, there's much more buy-in from Mexican populations, Korean population, like a lot of the Asian populations. There's certain populations that don't buy in, and it's very evident. Like, it's weird to see that you have people coming to this country and complaining and want to change it to the old country that they just escaped. And it's like, why'd you leave? It's like you just want our resources because you guys can't figure it out on yourselves. But if your government's so beautiful and great, then why couldn't y'all figured it out? It's kind of wild. But anyway, let's get into it.
Stand up for what they truly believe in. That, I think, is something to be respected.
And what he was saying is, yeah, they didn't bend the knee. And I think that's one of the things too. It's like you're a country, you're a sovereign nation. If the people don't want you to do that, then and you don't do it, then don't do it. It's that simple. I think one of the things too is like, you know, it's you're a sovereign country. The best thing, the one thing that comes with that is controlling you're allowed to control your own borders. How is it that immigrants that have never lived in your country ever are the ones going to dictate how your country should run? Makes no sense to me. Good job, Poland.
I think the media likes to twist words a lot and conflate illegal immigration with legal immigration. And this is an issue that I have with America as well.
Yep.
I am a son of an immigrant. My parents migrated to the US, but they did so legally. And it frustrates me when people say you are racist if you are anti-immigration. No, I'm pro-legal immigration, but anti-illegal immigration.
Exactly. So I want to say this too. So my dad only got his legal documentation. He was legally working for like 25, 30 years here. So he was legally here, but he never had papers, right? And he still can't vote, but he was in line for so long that he only got his papers like 5 years ago. And you know what we did? My family did? All of our extended family threw him a large party to celebrate his citizenship. Because one, it's like it's like the dream, the American dream. He did everything the right way. He didn't cross here illegally. I mean, he was brought over when he was a kid, so he can control it. But he, at the earliest stages, bought into the American system and wanted to get his papers as quick as he can. And what's so beautiful about his story is like we all celebrated him, like it was a celebration of life and an achievement. Like it was like he won the lottery, right? And we treated him like that because it's like he worked hard for it and he learned English. I mean, it's impressive. And I think that's one of the things. It's like, well, and it was crazy. He didn't do it with handouts. And it's like it takes away from people who work hard to do everything correctly when the government and like very right lead or left leaning people are like just giving things for free and just handing things out. It's just kind of fucked up. It's really fucked up.
But it seems like those two get mixed up. I'm pretty sure they do that on purpose to try to confuse people so that if you say that you're anti-immigration, you're labeled as a racist. But it goes a lot deeper than that. So I think we have to reflect on Poland's history first to understand why they are the way that they are and why they think the way that they do. For 120 years, this country was wiped off the map and they didn't get their country back until 1918. They had it for maybe 2 decades until they were invaded again in World War II by Germany and then Russia, and then they had Soviet rule in this country up until 1989. It's understandable why Polish people are so hesitant to outsiders, and I've made this observation. They see foreigners as either an invader or an ally. Thankfully, as an East Asian person, we are considered allies. There has been a Vietnamese population here in Poland since the 60s who have done a really good job of maintaining our good reputation. They integrate extremely well into Polish society.
And I think that's also what's important, right? So like I don't want to single out any other populations because you probably already know who I'm going to be talking, like who they are. But I want to give an example of Mexican populations. What's very different than like is people like, so just so you know, the people crossing illegally right now aren't Mexicans into the US. They're actually from South America. So Mexico is like Central America, South America. And it's funny because they call themselves I don't want to get into a rant, but here's my thing. These people come to America, call themselves Mexican when they're not. They're like from Honduras, Venezuela, all these other countries, right? Just so they can mooch off the reputation that Mexicans built. Because Mexicans, we have a stereotype of being hard workers, doing the job, just getting it done. We don't care. We just want to work and support our families. We want to buy into what's America is, and we want to achieve the American dream. Because again, one of America's strongest allies is Mexico. So it's just something to think about. It's just crazy how it all plays out, and even the people who bought in and assimilated very well are still being punished for very far left ideas.
Vietnamese people, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, all of us Asians, we have a very positive reputation here. And if you look at my comment section, Polish people will say they never had a negative experience with us. So we're almost like the model immigrant here in Poland. I've heard a lot of Polish people have issues with the Ukrainians being in their country, to be honest. And I'm not gonna get into that topic. But if you come from an African nation, or specifically the Muslim nations, you are seen as an invader. And I don't think that this is a problem, to be honest, because there's so much evidence of it going on in Western Europe right now. And I think
it's, again, going back to the idea of You're fleeing a country that obviously, again, let's take the religion aspect out of it, right? For now, you're fleeing a country that's not doing so great. Why would you want the new country that you're going to that is successful without you, by the way, without you, to become the government style that you just fled? Now let's add the religion aspect. It doesn't necessarily, not like these countries were successful because of the religion. No, there's a culture, there's a different type of standard, there's a different type of history because of that religion, right? Like, hell, even in the US, we have so much architecture that is inspired by Christianity that were for buildings that have nothing to do with religion. That's just how it is. Which unfortunately, a lot of skyscrapers are replacing these because we're getting crowded. But it still stands that like there's so much history to what that location is, and you just bring people in who want to not assimilate, but replace it, all while taking handouts, is very different. It's like, how can you be the moral judge when you're literally mooching and complaining? And here's an example. If you don't know, there's a lot of Catholic inspiration, like Catholic inspiration, right? In the US. There's so much like historical buildings that are like have Catholic inspiration, right? Which is funny because it's not the majority religion in the US, but it's crazy that there is. But I mean, it's also because if you look at some of the architecture, it's amazing. So I mean, it just goes to show you that even like subcultures, sub religions in the bigger whole pie still exist because they chose to assimilate, but bring specific things to the table rather than just continually take away or destroy.
Saw the riots going on in the UK and how it was straight up a race war between the British people who are fighting to protect their homeland versus literally like Muslim people in their country. It's a complicated situation because a lot of these Muslim people were also born in the UK. So I guess they are also considered British people, just like I would be considered American. And this is what happens when you let in a bunch of unchecked immigration for a couple of generations. You're naturally going to have a big conflict of ideas. So a common word that seems to be tossed around now.
Now, I will say that there is a statistic in the US that is kind of the reason or the rationale for why we take in so many immigrants. Is typically it's not the first generation, it's the second, or I think it's the second or the third. Then that family will become fully assimilated to American culture. But what's happened is that was based on the historical data that presented itself for prior to social media, prior to even brain rot, like TikTok brain rot, where you believe everything, right? And so you're having generation where that data and that whole expectation is proving not to be true.
Nowadays is racist or Islamophobic. You see a lot of that in the European Parliament. You see a lot of that in the US when you talk about this topic of immigration.
And I think that's what's really interesting. It's like there's a lot of people throwing the word racist around, um, which is kind of losing its meaning very quickly because it's especially in the US what makes the US very special is that it's a melting pot when it works, right? Again, when it works. Like my closest group of friends, we're all different races, but we have come to the agreement that even though we're all different, we're going to treat each other the same in the good and the bad, right? Like we're allowed to make fun of each other regardless of what's going on in the world because we all came together in that moment because we're friends, we're brothers. So it's like you don't see that as much anymore because it's like it's this expectation of HR is always in the room, which kind of sucks.
But something I really respect about Poland is that they're not afraid to say no. They would rather take the fine than give up their values of letting these refugees into their country. It seems like they're one of the only countries left in the world that have any form of backbone. So I have no problem with Muslims individually. I think
that's also just the concept. I mean, if you're really just looking at fundamentally the idea of a backbone as a country, especially like, again, people are judging Poland really harshly, but if they really examine the history of the country, it makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because like you learn that we learn a lot about Poland through American history because Poland has been in the center of so many things just because it's, I mean, the location is in the middle of so many things, right? Um, it's almost as if, I mean, American education failed us always. It's kind of the meme. But if you look at the history of Poland, you would understand why Polish people want sovereignty and execute the one thing that you're allowed to do as a sovereign nation is to enforce your borders. That is the one thing. That's the whole purpose of being a country, is the borders, the lines in the ground, right? That's why, right? Nobody is throwing a fit when India is enforcing their borders, right? I mean, people are, other countries, right? China is trying to push into India. But besides the point, you understand, like, that is the whole purpose of being a country, is that you're allowed to enforce your borders. That's the point.
Think they're great people. I respect the religion a lot. I think fundamentally Islam is a peaceful religion, but I have
Yes.
a big problem with any religious group in general, specifically with Islam, because the religion is so tied to every aspect of their life. A lot of people in religious settings like to use a religion as a shield to
Yeah, and this is very true. So I will say this again: there's very different types of Islam. If you don't know, there's a couple different kinds. I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but I have some of my best friends are from Saudi Arabia. They have a different type of Islam, or not the different type, but they interpret Islam very different and they practice very different, right? They have different standards of different culture. They see it. They still are very, very religious and they practice very religiously, but they don't enforce it. Like, they don't force it on other people. And they actually, so at least I met these guys in college and they became lifelong friends. So one of the things I asked them was like, "Whoa, why do you?" Because I was so new to understanding that, like, I'd never met anybody from Saudi Arabia prior to then. And one of the things they told me is like, we don't use it as a tool to punish others. It's one of my friends told me. We don't use it as a tool to punish others. We just rather use it to hold ourselves accountable. That's really what it is. So, like, it's rather to be like, hey, I know what I should be doing in my life. I'm not going to use it to punish you. Like, you're not my responsibility. And then that's what you would say. It's like we're not responsible for every person in front of us, but because at the the very basic fundamental thing is we're responsible for ourselves, right? We gotta we're responsible to ourselves and to God, right? So it's the idea of, like, they put responsibility and accountability first, whereas, like, maybe other cultures and different interpretations treat it very differently, right?
refuse to compromise on certain things with their life. And this is something I experienced personally with my last marriage, which is why I had to leave. Every time I asked my ex-wife for us to compromise on something or to see things my way, she would refuse to do it because her religion did not allow.
And that is very true. As somebody who grew up around Christian, because I'm U.S., right? It's not just Islam; it's even Christian. It's like, it's the idea of, like, I guess, let me give an example: porn, right? Porn is seen as a sin. But ain't nothing there. God is not going to smite you down for busting a nut every once in a while. But if you're marriage or you're dating somebody who might be extremely religious, um, they might see just that you watching that one video that one time as a reason to break up and never talk to you again. So it's one of those things where, like, what are the standards, and why can't you just be flexible with somebody else if you care about them?
Allow her to do that, and she had to follow what God was telling her to do. So
Yep.
when you deal with people like that, where religion is such an integral part of their life, it's very hard for those people to integrate into their society because the religion tells them that they don't have to. It was
Yeah, and it's a cop out, which is crazy because there's so many pros to religion. I don't want to ever shit on religion because there's, like, for example, I know when going to college, a very liberal college, people used to shit on religion all the time. And I used to say, like, well, if you hate religion so much, what are you going to tell somebody who's a recovering alcoholic who chooses to use it to learn and lean on religion to get recovery, to recover from that and keep themselves accountable? What are you going to say to them? Oh, your God's fake, you should just start drinking again? No. There's so many people. I know so many people who recovered, who were able to move on with their lives from the addiction of alcohol, for being an alcoholic. And so for me, it's like I've seen the truth that comes with religions, regardless of what the religion is. It can be useful, but it has to be more as a tool in your life rather than like a weapon, right? And it's even funny because like it's even a saying, like you live by the sword, you die by it.
It was always weird to me that most Islamic nations are so intolerant to any other religion coming into their country, like Christianity or Catholicism or Buddhism, and that's totally societally acceptable. But then when the reverse tries to happen, where Christian nations refuse Islam coming into their country, then all of a sudden they get labeled all of these names. So imagine going into somebody's house, telling them how to run that house, and when they disagree and tell you to get out, you call them racist or bigoted. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's their home, it's their rules. I'm very aware.
Yeah, it's very, and I would say this. It's not all Islamic nations, by the way, but like I guess the good example, like Saudi Arabia. If I'm a different religion, I can go there. They're fine with it. They just say, "Hey, respect the house, respect the home. That we want you to be a guest. We want you to see our beautiful country. Just don't, just follow the rules when you're in. You know what I mean? Like, and they do the same thing when they're here in the U.S. So it's very different. That's why, like, if you look at it, the U.S. has a really strong relationship with that country, and maybe not some others. But the idea is like even that. It's just a basic house rule, like being a good guest.
Aware that I am a guest in this country, so it's my responsibility as a guest to follow the rules, integrate into society, and not try to change things because I am not a part of this nation. Something I've also been thinking about is like, why don't these immigrants go to other Arab nations, like the richer ones, like UAE or Qatar? Doesn't it make sense to go to another Arab nation with the same religion, the same values?
But that's even what's crazy. They're not. They're the same religion, quote unquote, but not. It's not the same values, right? Some of them are a little bit more modern, a little bit more progressive, whereas some aren't. And so it's like they either want the extreme or they want to force the West to change. It's never in between.
Values, the same kind of infrastructure, but why are they so intent on coming to Europe specifically? And I think it's because of the European way of life is generally a lot better. It's a lot safer here. It's a lot cleaner. It's because of the European values. But unfortunately, a lot of people from certain places around the world have no interest in European values or Western values. They want to come, enjoy all of the benefits, but not integrate into society. And unfortunately, Islam and a lot of Western countries have values that are so inherently in conflict with each other. So it's almost difficult.
That is true. That is true, but it's not just Islamic countries, right? One of the things I noticed, so like when I was in college, I had a roommate who had a friend. I know, it's a trust me bro story. But anyway, he was living in a dorm, and his dorm used to flood, like drip water all the time. It used to flood all the time. And so he was just like, "Hey, can somebody fix this? Like, what's going on? It's a leak." And they couldn't figure out what was going on because it was like, "Oh, the pipes are fine, blah, 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 blah." So then they go into the room, right, of this individual, the person that lived above him. Turns out the guy wasn't showering with a shower curtain. Maybe he never understood what you do with a shower. And not only that, he would take a shower, leave the water, and then wash dishes, wash clothes in the water he just took a bath in. But then it was so bad that there was like this much water that was constantly just there. Like his restroom was just filled with water constantly. Right? And so when they asked him like, "Hey, this is your fault for you damaged the person's underneath stuff. It's your fault. You caused this." And so when the guy tried to get money for that, to like, "Hey, his insurance claim trying to do it," they didn't cover it because the dorms didn't want to put the blame on the student because they were from a different country, which I understand may be a mistake, but in the same way, like, where's the accountability? If you came here to be a part of the society, you should still follow the same rules. We all make mistakes. They can learn from that. But because they couldn't blame the student for that, and the dorm couldn't take responsibility, the insurance couldn't give. It's like a whole legality thing of if the dorm would have taken the blame or like blame somebody rather than it just being an accident, or like rather than just be like, "Oh, we can't claim it." Like it's a whole thing. I'm not a lawyer, but just trust me on this. I know it's a trust me bro story. But the idea was because the dorm didn't want to blame someone from a different country because they were so scared of holding them accountable, someone else who is accustomed to taking a shower and using their bath appropriately gets punished.
Difficult for us to coexist, and that's why you can see in countries like the UK right now, they're having a war of ideas with the people who are naturally there and people who have been passed down from generations of immigrants. So let's be real. The main reason that a lot of these European countries are safe and why a lot of Asian countries are safe is because we are homogenous societies. This is exactly how the Scandinavian countries were before they let in all these immigrants. And I don't think it's a coincidence that there's a correlation between their open door policy versus the rise in crime and gangs growing in their country.
That is 100% true. And it's not because, like, say for example, the people coming to the countries are wanting to be criminals. It's just because the people who are criminals in the country know that they can prey on those people and convince them into their ways much easier because they have no standards, right? Or expectations, really, what to expect. It's just something to think about.
The interesting thing about Poland is that when I say homogenous, it's not necessarily on a basis of race, but it's more on a basis of culture and ideas. If we look at Polish history, they were a bunch of tribes that were constantly shifted around due to war and invasions. Polish people is more about an idea and a flag that they're under rather than all being like white. People.
Let's read this. Hold up. I gotta move my camera. And I think that's kind of what the US was for a long time. It was the idea of, hey, we can all be from different places, but still coexist as long as we all buy in. But that's changed. It's more of let's complain, blame other people for our problems. Oh, I'm not even from here, but you got to accommodate me in every single way. That's fucked up. All right. So to whom it may concern, to be Pole doesn't mean to be white. To become a Pole, one can accept our history, traditions, and habits, good ones and lifestyle, more family oriented than Western ones, which I prefer, and to be aware that the Roman Catholic religion is the base of our nationality. Again, and which is funny because like Mexican culture is very based on Catholic religion. All of these become easy when you speak Polish, which is why I'm trying to learn Polish. That there are many people in the history of Poland who are our national heroes without any drop of Polish blood, which is really cool. Same thing with America, which is ironic.
Say that Poland is racist, that's kind of unfair because it's more like Polish people are actually extremely welcoming to you if you come in, obey the laws, integrate into society, and follow the rules. And if you learn the language, you understand and appreciate the history, then you can integrate extremely well into the society. The problem is when specific immigrants come into societies and refuse to integrate. Poland has a problem with that, and I think that's totally justified. I think
and it's only fair. As a country, you're allowed to enforce your borders. If you can't, then why even be a country?
Country in the world has the right to put their citizens first, and this is actually a big frustration that I have with my own country, the United States, right now. It doesn't make sense to me that we're sending all this money to foreign wars that have nothing to do with us, and it's the American taxpayer that suffers as a result.
And then yeah, it's actually kind of crazy. So for example, I don't know where your stance is on the Israel-Palestine thing. It's kind of fucked up that technically Israel is the ally of the US. Yes, we have a benefit from them being there, right? But what's kind of ironic is, so not only do we send them a bunch of money, we also send Hamas, the terrorist group, and not again, Palestinians are not all Palestinians are Hamas, by the way, right? But we also send more money to the other side of Israel through different nonprofit organizations because they're suffering. So not only are we funding one side of the war, well, now we have to pay for the victims because they don't know how to support themselves, right? It's crazy. It's actually insane.
Response. It doesn't make sense to me that we've seen this huge uptick in illegal immigration into our country, and these people get housing.
I don't know about this graph. I'm not going to comment on that.
These people get food stamps and resources, and these people.
But it is true. I mean, it's too easy, too often to get resources without identifying yourself because it's seen as racist to do that. And I think I understand the fundamental like principle of like this should be for everyone in this country, but the idea is if these individuals who are taking these resources, these nonprofit resources, and not contributing, this money has to come from somewhere, right? There is a great video by Tyler Oliveira where he's talking about, he's in Ohio, right? I think it's Ohio. But anyway, it's basically a bunch of people coming in, taking resources from that local town. I got to look it up. It's a whole thing. I'll probably link it in the description, or yeah, just trust me on this. All right, we'll probably watch it later and we'll comment on that later. But the idea was you had veterans who served the country waiting in line behind people who just showed up a week ago. You see what I'm saying? And so that's what's kind of really fucked up. It's just the whole premise of waiting in line for a country you fought for behind people, and then if you can't get in, if the place closes by the time you get the resources, like get to the place in front of the line, you're screwed over, and then you got to come back and wait in line all day again. And you can't always wait in line because that person probably has a job, while the people who are immigrated there illegally, right, suddenly they have all the time in the world to do it because they don't have any jobs. So it's
almost get prioritized over American citizens themselves. How does that make any sense?
And that keeps happening over and over again with like some of these cities getting these cities. I'm talking about cities, not just the states. Cities giving immigrants cash cards to live off of.
It's so refreshing to see a country put its citizens first, and that's exactly how it should be. So how has my experience been here in Poland? Honestly, it's been overwhelmingly positive. This is a place where I can consider myself staying for the long term because I would love to raise a family in Poland. It's so amazing when I see kids playing in the park until late, like 8 to 10, 11, 12-year-olds without any supervision. I see these.
We used to have that here in the US. We used to have that. We can't have that. It's so crazy. I've been alive long enough to know and seen. We used to be able to play at the parks. But you know what the city does now? They take basketball hoops off the backboards so that no one can play in the park, or they just straight up take out city lights in the parks so that when it gets dark, there's nobody playing. And you know what's ironic? Not only did that, but now they're letting people camp and live there because they're homeless. And now you can't even take your kids to the park without worried about them stepping on a bunch of needles and getting fent and like getting shot up. It's crazy. So it's just wild.
These kids getting on public transportation by themselves because there's a general understanding that this country is so safe and nothing will happen to them. I personally feel really connected to this country because, yes, on my YouTube channel, of course, I get some negative comments here and there, but the vast majority of my comments are extremely positive, extremely welcoming.
I only got like 4,000 subs. I get negative comments all the time for things that I don't even know they're saying. Because I used to cover only gaming, and I would get hate comments for things that have nothing to do with what's going on. Like I would talk about a game called Fable. If you don't know, it's an RPG, fantasy RPG. I would get hate comments like insulting me, and I'm just making like a tutorial on how to do something, and the insult wouldn't even be about something that you could see or anything like that. It'd just be random. It's like, what the hell is going on? So that's why I like hate comment. I read all the comments, but hate comments really don't. They'll always come for you because that's just people having a bad day and they need to take it out on somebody. At least that's the way I see it.
More Asian people here in Poland because Asians are highly respected here. And even the videos where I criticize Poland, it's met with a lot of positivity because I understand the culture, I've learned about the history, and I do it in a way that's respectful, but ultimately because I want Poland to improve. Safety has no price in my opinion. I've lived in Colombia, I've lived in the US. When I was worrying about my safety all the time, I feel like it strains your mental health so much. And
it does, especially when like in the US, it's like, oh, there's so many guns on the street. People have guns. There's more guns in the U.S. than there are people. Like there's a sense of security that comes with that, but there's a lot of just gun violence from kids, teenagers in these poor neighborhoods, which is crazy because like at no point they always blame the police, they always blame society, they blame everybody but the parenting and that child for them purposely grabbing that gun and doing violence. So it's kind of crazy.
It's just constantly stressed about it. But when you live in a truly safe nation, you just feel a lot more at peace. And to be honest, I feel a lot more free. Like people talk about how the US is so free, but if you're not free to walk around at night, go into parks because you're afraid something is going to happen, if you feel like you have the need to carry a weapon, are you really living in a free society?
Exactly.
I don't think so. I do think it's fair to say that because I come from East Asian descent that I'm treated differently compared to some of the other foreigners. I have some friends from Africa, from Jamaica, and they've all had overwhelmingly positive experiences here in Poland too. And it just comes to show that as long as you follow these 4 things, you can become Polish. Work hard, respect your neighbor, follow the rules, and don't be a dick.
And I think that goes for anything. Like that's just like on an individual basis, right? Um and then like even he says don't be a dick. I think it's just don't complain if you're there. You're the one there. You chose to be there. Like don't complain. God, it's you know what's funny is I've always like I've never felt like this for most of my life. Like I never felt like the way I do now for most of my life. Because of just being like, well, I'm sure it'll sort itself out. But then everything just kept getting worse and worse, and the ideas just become more Yas Queen inclusivity. And it's like we're becoming more Yas Queen slay, but we're not really getting better. Like it's just crazy. It's crazy to think. Anyway, great video. I know I turned a 9-minute video into a 40-minute video. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. We probably will watch videos on Seattle so you can see what I mean. The problem with liberal ideas. Anyway, I don't want to make this political, but I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Love y'all.